Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Tales from a Sports Tragic. I decided that I would rather, because I'm surrounded with people who work in sport and who really love sport to an extent to, take up sports as a career option. I thought I'll not look too far. I'll look up to a dear friend, Amlan. I've known him for a very long time. And because I keep hearing from people, this admission season has gone on for longer than we thought it would. I thought I would reach out to Amlan and take or foray into his journey into working in sports and or doing something that he really wanted to. Because I remember the first time I met him, Amlan was Amlan was a PMT aspirant, who was going to become a doctor, and clearly life hasn't shaped up that way. So welcome, Amlan, and thank you for being on the show. But
Well,
please, apart from introducing yourself as working in sport, can you tell us how this happened in the first place?
uh, as you've already mentioned that when we met, I was actually preparing for my medical entrances, and it was sort of a blessing that I met you, and eventually, like as in, I ended up being here. But yeah, sports, I like as in. I've been following this podcast and I've seen so many people narrating their stories. For me, it has not been like as in, like I said, I wasn't very hardcore into sports, like as in not into sports quizzing, not or not like as in, into actively playing sports. But it was just something that I used liking. Like as in, I just loved playing. I didn't take it up professionally, or nor did I represent my school team or college team or anything like that. It's just that my school had a very very healthy sports culture. So did my city, but it wasn't professional sports. So he just ended up like as in, going to the ground playing, and that's how my love for the game started, especially football. Like my school had this annual football tournament, which was a massive, massive deal for everyone in the entire school, not just for students, even for the teachers. Because what used to happen was that whoever wins the tournament and the best players from that tournament used to play a match against the teachers on Teachers' Day. So it was sort of a dream for all of us that we will go out to the ground, play, and yeah, the ultimate dream is to play in that teachers versus students match, and that's how used to practice all day, and that's how it all started. Obviously parents weren't that supportive when I said that probably I want to play football, let alone like as working in football. So, and like as one of those guys who used to do everything in school, I was thought to be one of those guys. He will do really well in life, so let him study science, and probably he will be a doctor. So I was sent to Delhi. uh, but yeah, reality did hit me that if I don't do what I like, probably I'll always end up regretting. So that's how it happened. And it of anyone else that how I started writing. I was not even good at writing, but still I thought that if I can't play, maybe I can write about it. And that's how it all started. And today here I am.
Fair enough. I'm not going to, take you too far from that point. पर यार 17 साल के एक बच्चे के लिए you had just come out of Assam. You had come to Delhi to do your class 11th and 12th and study for medical entrance exams. और 10th में कितने थे? 95% था? Usual did
Usual.
really well in 10th, है ना? हाँ. And came to Delhi to study for PMT. When did that, how did that happen where you thought that nahi yaar medical nahi karna hai? And for everyone listening, I mean, Amlan's worked with me for a very long time, but Amlan did clear the medical entrance examination and got a very very good rank to begin with, but chose not to do that and instead ended up doing journalism from Delhi College of Arts and Commerce. But Amlan, how did that happen? How did that step where you decided कि नहीं यार, नहीं नहीं करना मुझे मेडिकल, नहीं बनना डॉक्टर, कुछ और करते हैं जिसमें कुछ सेट पैटर्न नहीं है, क्योंकि सबसे बड़ा प्रॉब्लम तो हमारे लिए ये है ना कि सेट पैटर्न नहीं होता स्पोर्ट्स में काम करने का. तो ये कैसे सोचा अमलान? हाउ डिड यू कम अप विद दिस, और हाउ डिड यू कन्विंस योरसेल्फ एंड देन योर पेरेंट्स अबाउट दिस?
It's sort of an accident, in fact. Matlab, I think like you will also relate to this. When you come from a small town, right? Like Guwahati, though it's a metropolitan city now, but at the end of the day, it's a small town. It's a tier two city. So आपके पास वो options नहीं होते कि this is what you can do in life. Like even now, I can't tell exactly what I'm doing to my parents. Like they will never understand कि क्या concept है. So 10th तक जो circle में था उसमें taking up sports management or sports administration was something which is very difficult to even remotely think about. जब Delhi आया, like as in, even then, like when I even started working in sports, I never really knew what exactly I wanted to do, let alone like as in, decide I will be in sport administration. My point was that how can I be more close to the game? जर्नलिस्ट बनने का शौक था, मतलब लिखने का काफी शौक था. So I used to like, as in, read newspapers. And interesting fact was that my father, he never allowed me to have cable television. So मेरे को sports देखने के लिए I didn't have an option. The only way I used to know about sports is about reading the sports page in a newspaper. So when I used to read, right, I used to probably reimagine how a game would have been like. As in, how if Manchester United is playing, I never knew how, like, as in, probably a player would look like. Only if a picture comes in, I could see, acha, yeah, this is what Rooney looks like. This is what, like, as in, Ronaldo looks like. And I used to read about it, and that's how I got to know. So once I came to Delhi, right, all of a sudden I was left alone, and I had a lot of time to think. कि मैं करना क्या चाहता हूँ. And I met the peer groups play a very important role in how you shape up your life. And that probably was one of those moments when I started out hanging out with students from across the country. Like, despite कि मैं एक coaching institute jata tha, which is one of the most prominent coaching institutes in the country. So you had students coming in from all walks of life. Like, I mean, you had people coming in from South Delhi, you had students coming in from Bihar, you had students coming from South India, and all of them had their own interests coming in. So जब आप hostel में रहते हो, you start hearing about it. तो आज ये match है, आज, like, I remember 2011 when India won the cricket World Cup. I was in a hostel and I was watching it on, like, as in at my mess with a group of students. And that was my first experience of actually watching a match in an environment where you had people cheering for, like, as in a team, and, like, then celebrating. It was a small TV. We just arranged it. हमने वो भाड़े पे लेके आके देखा था. So that moment, those moments really made a difference in my life. As to, maybe this is what I want to do. This is what the feeling that, like, as I sort of enjoy it. And yeah, to take that big decision of not taking up medical had a lot of other factors to like, as in, blame as well. Not blame, rather, like, as in, a lot of other factors did play a key role in doing it. But one of it was the fact that I actually got an opportunity to do what I wanted to do. Like, as in, when I started writing for the magazine that you founded, I think it gave me a purpose that, maybe I can do something with this as well. Even if I don't know how good I am, how bad I am, but if I try, I can do. So that confidence of doing something else, like, as in, like, as in, forced me to tell my parents that probably, this is, I don't want to be a doctor. ठीक है, मैं sports journalist नहीं बना, जो भी नहीं बना, but let me try. Let me at least get into this journalism course. And Delhi, I knew Delhi University had like few seats for guys, because most of the girls' colleges had offered journalism courses. Only I think two colleges offered journalism courses to, like, which is co-education, co-ed colleges offered journalism courses. And I tried my luck. Let me try. If I get through, why not? If I don't get through, my deal was that, if I don't get through Delhi University, I'll not study in a private university and, like, spend a lot of money, which I couldn't afford to at that point of time, and go back to studying medical. But fortunately enough, I did get through the Delhi University journalism entrance, which was probably the last batch which had the entrance. And obviously, I did not do very well in my boards, class 12 boards. It's a different story again. But coaching mein ye tha ki I was prepared in a way that, I could crack entrances, but boards wasn't that great. But thanks to the, like, as an entrance, I did get into journalism course in Delhi College of Arts and Commerce, and that's where it all began. And I decided, no, even though I've entered a college, let me keep working on the side, like, probably, like, I can catch up with something. And yeah, that's where it all began.
Fair enough. I mean, I also kind of strongly advocate the part where you keep trying to work in the field which you're trying to venture into, and I think that gave you a head start into the industry, as to, like, put it very bluntly. But I mean, I'm a little more interested on this whole academic journey of yours, because you also went to one of the premier institutes in the country for your masters. You went to a Tata Institute of Social Sciences, and you did really well over there. And yet, as in, and not many people who'd come out of that place would end up working in sports immediately after. So, I mean, did you always, go in thinking that you'll come back to working in sports, or did you go in with an open mind? Because I'm certain that there was no module on sports journalism in your course, and there's very little that you would have done in university which would have made you tilt towards sports. And yet, you immediately after college, or your master's degree, basically, you came back to working in sports. So how did, I mean, I'm just trying to understand how would someone who's quite good academically, and not just in a smaller subset of people who try to do only sports, but just good academically generally, and yet try and persist with the idea of working in sports. How did that come along?
Like as in, I will not say I'm very good academically, but yeah, what I believe is that I enjoy the subject that I'm studying. Like as in, and that makes a huge difference when you probably like study it, and when you eventually venture, like when you write, even you write your exams. Like if you enjoy your subject, you tend to do well. That's what I believe, and that's how it has worked out for me.
The
But yeah,
subject in this
unfortunately,
case is journalism or
I would say
sports.
media,
Sorry,
media.
media.
I'll not
Fair
put a
enough. Yeah.
bracket journalism, but media as a whole. Like as in, if you have the interest, you can do it. Sports, as I say, has been a passion and something that I have, like as always aspired to do well in. Like as in, I'm like I would not say I'm very very passionate, but I have really wanted to excel in sports. And since I couldn't do it, so it sort of became an addiction for me to be associated with it. Unfortunately, in any of the media modules in the country, we do not really have a sports journalism specific course. In fact, none of the teachers are actually also sports, like they're not trained to be sports journalists, or like there's nothing as such. I like as in in my undergrad, I like as in since I was working very closely with with Indian football magazine, and like as in I've been following it. So I thought that there is so many avenues that one can explore covering a sport. While covering a sport, like as in, I had the fortune of attending football matches with some of the most seasoned and veteran journalists, and the things that they have told us, like something as basic as carrying a small stopwatch, because you're watching a match, you don't know what time it is. Those things are never taught in class. So I don't like, why don't you explore like as in this field a little bit more and probably do something to it. Uh, yes, you mentioned TIS. Tata Institute of Social Sciences is one of the most academic places in the country, and like as in, fortunately enough, they do not discriminate with anything that you want to do. Like as in, there are people studying serious, like as in, issues of the country, but at the same time, if you go and pitch them that I want to study something in sports, they will never stop you. So that was sort of a boon for me, that I could do something, and I was not the first one who has worked in sports after passing out of the course that I did in TIS. I had my seniors who had done same. There were people who have made documentaries on football from my department, and in fact, one of my super seniors have like as in has won awards on the similar lines, because of his work in sports sociology or sports culture. Similarly, my immediate senior Sujata Sarkar, she has also worked with us, like as with me in multiple projects, like and we've done exactly the same thing. So it's not that like people who have been to TIS have not worked in sports, they have. But what I tried doing differently was to write my dissertation on like as in on Indian football, and that's something like as in that's an inspiration I took from you, in fact, because of your MPhil dissertation. I thought that there is so much that I can explore in the current context, and I realized that the literature available on Indian football is very less limited and always constrained to one particular era. But after a point of time, there are so many things that have changed over time with the information boom happening. But we still do not have really academic works being made on it. And that's how I started, like, as writing my dissertation on Indian football. And that actually made a lot of avenues for me to venture into sports administration, and like somehow like I ended up right people at the right time, and I like ended up being where I am right now.
ये dissertation के बारे में बताया यार अमलान. I've never actually read the whole thing, but you have told me in patches about it. What was the idea? I get the research methodology part of it, which you briefly explained over here, that there wasn't much available to look into. But what was the idea behind getting into it to begin with, number one? And how do you follow it up with? Did you go around talking to a lot of people, asking questions? As in, what was the basis of just introduce everyone who's listening to this, to your dissertation?
Well, it the basic idea was to write about talent identification development in Indian football. I wanted to know that how does one take up the game, eventually reach a level where they can play in the national team, because that was something even for me when I was in school. I wondered that how does one get into the national team. I did not know what is the process, so I really wanted to explore that process. But like as in, you have written an ample dissertation, so what you start with and what you end with is at times can be like completely different. So based on the resources available, what I ended up doing was I ended up studying about how things have changed with like as with time, how we have made football a televised product, that how it was a leisure activity to the current professional scene, and how it is packaged for television. So that's exactly, so that's what my like like was in prime dissertation topic became, and it's just mostly to do with my guide and also the institute. Because as as with the department that you are in and with the guide that you have, you also had to mold and shape your dissertation to fulfill what vision your what ideology your department has, and what they expect out of you. It's not very fair, but still, you also have to know that if you don't have a resource person to judge your dissertation, you cannot work on it, because that's how I think research works. You need to have people to help you out. So what I did was that I tried exploring the Indian Super League, of course, that how it originated. I tried starting from the 1980s and 1970s when India were one of the football giants in Asia, how we diminished and how we started out with professional football, and how this whole process of Disneyfication and McDonaldification happened in Indian football. That how we have made it celebrity friendly with glitter and glamour, and where and how it is heading, and also tried to explore fan culture as well. That how what the traditional hubs of Indian football were, how people used to follow it, and how at the same time new teams have come up, and how there's a cross sectionality between this new bunch of people who have started following football. Of course, there is the fan base for European football in India, and how we're trying to but there exists a gap between the Indian football lovers and the European football lovers, and how probably football is a televised product is trying to bridge that gap, and how we have got and how far we have reached and what's the future. So that was sort of my dissertation, and to talk and to how did I find my data? I, of course, started attending matches, started talking to players. I went in as part-time journalist, attended press conferences. So along with the questions for press releases, I used to, or match reports, I used to ask questions for my dissertation. I used to keep one part of it for my dissertation and the other part for my, professional assignments that I was doing in. Have attended tournaments, have talked to coaches from grassroots to professional level. Of course, read a lot of literature, most of it which was was written by some of the great journalists like Novi Kapadia and others. And yeah, that's how I ended up finishing my dissertation.
Nice. That's very intriguing to say the least. When you venture into something which isn't written much about in the academic circles, and then just go on with it. So that's amazing, Amlan. I'll take you to the next part of what you have been doing since then, because again, I can't stress enough that Amlan is very, very sharp academically. So he cleared the UGC net, decided not to become a professor. He's basically making a mockery of our education system, where he clears an exam, which most people aspire to, and then does not end up doing what people end up doing after clearing the exam. So you cleared UGC net. You did not become a professor. I mean, I would want to ask why, but as in, why would you give the UGC net in the first place? This is my first question. And yeah, one thing at a time.
But
because this is beyond PMT. पापा मम्मी को अब बताने की जरूरत नहीं थी. अब तो खुद एग्जाम दिया ना. तो खुद एग्जाम दिया, पर कभी प्रोफेसर बनना नहीं था, तो एग्जाम क्यों दिया? या मतलब हाँ, I mean, if you can just solve.
Well, this comes from a person whose article was, or whom a article was published about how he clears entrances. So that's quite funny.
That was a very long time ago, Amlan, and I'm not the same person anymore. But yeah, thank you.
But but आप कॉलेज में होते हो तो सब कर रहे होते, तो मुझे भी लगा कि करता हूँ. I really, as I said, I really enjoyed the subject media, or journalism to be specific, and I've always wanted to study it, and I still want to study more and take it up on a more serious note, probably do a PhD later on in my life. But the reason I did when I wanted to test what my aptitude was. I really enjoy teaching. If you give me an opportunity to speak to students or teach, I really enjoy doing it. So I did attempt my net, and fortunately enough, in my first attempt I did clear it. Despite that, I didn't prepare anything. I just went and I realized, okay, I'm in touch with the subject, so it's easier for me to clear. And I think that's the case for it, everyone. If you're studying something regularly, the moment if you're in the momentum, aapka clear ho jayega. You give a break, probably then it becomes a little bit difficult. So it did happen that I was totally in line, because मैंने bachelor's के बाद immediately master's किया था, so I was in touch with the subject all throughout. So I did clear it. But over time, I realized that if I want to teach someone and I don't have relevant experience on my hand, what can I what can I tell them? At least even now, I don't know, I haven't worked that long. But if I go and tell someone, at least I have a bank of 2 or 3 tournaments that I've worked in. which had included experiences that I can share with anyone that I'm talking to. So that's what I think. Like, as in, if you are teaching someone, it's important that you also have your own bank of experiences for them, because textbook में पढ़ के तो आप कोई भी सिखा देगा, पर वही है कि what you bring in as an experience professional is something which I think is very much required when you are like especially talking to young people like who probably want to take up the subject. And it's very important that you generate that interest right at this young age, because if I like I wouldn't want to say this, but we all have had some bad teachers in our life as well, right? And like as in, for and like as in, you also start hating a subject because of the teacher. So I really don't want to be that teacher where like as in, students start hating a particular subject because like as in, I couldn't teach it or couldn't tell them anything which is relevant or interesting.
Fair enough. You talked about working on a few tournaments. Why don't you talk me through and everyone else through the tournaments that you have worked on? Start off with the Under 17 World Cup. And how did it feel? I know, I mean, you were there in HQ with us for a while, but how did it feel working in your hometown on something, which not many people would have imagined coming to India till a while ago? So how was that experience? And then, moving into the bigger things like working on the India Super League for 2, 3 seasons, if I'm not wrong. How did all of that pan out for you?
Uh, it's how I started working with the under like the first FIFA tournament in India was sort of like as in I don't know how do I put it, because I exactly did not know what I was stepping into. For me, I knew that when I remember like as in I think you were there. It was on Barefoot that we posted about India getting the hosting rights, and from that moment to actually joining the LOC to work for it, I just knew that probably I would want to work in something like this, but I never knew what exactly like the work would be. But thankfully enough, the team was such a good team that including yourself, Joycer, and Javier, and everyone else involved in the team, that they never let me feel that this is something that I have never done before. I sort of thought that it's an expansion of what my sports journalist career is. That I will write, मैं match देखूंगा लिखूंगा, but there is so many different dimensions to the work that you do, and that happened like and I learned it while I was working on the tournament. It's not that कि मैं train होके आया था I will to work in a tournament. I was trained in the due course. And eventually I ended up being in Guwahati. Now it's always very special to go back to the place where it all started, right? Like as in the stadium which hosted the World Cup was one of the stadiums where I used to play as a kid. Tab obviously it was not a grand stadium, but to see your state host it was indeed a very very special moment, and to be in that stadium. For a lot of us, like as in, I remember during our school days, we used to go to that stadium as our like as in, sports day ka visit, and we used to get like as in, Arey, ye stadium hai, and that feeling sets in, right? And then you see a FIFA flag, your national flag, and like international teams coming in and playing in that ground. That's something that you can't really probably express. And it was a very challenging yet very like big experience, very entertaining experience for me. I think like in a course of 3 months, I've aged like 2-3 years. मैं क्या था क्या मतलब as someone who used to get fluttered and angered like at any given point of time कुछ भी हो जाए गलत हो जाए to probably ending like things at peace वहाँ पे. So it was quite a journey. And about Indian Super League 2015 again, we went for the finals. Very coincidentally, you have always been in those important moments of my life, and like as in it's like as in it's very very difficult for me to tell in front of you, but
अपनी अपनी किस्मत है अमलान. मेरी किस्मत अच्छी थी कि मैं तेरे साथ मैच देख रहा था बस बाकी बाकी लोगों की किस्मत अच्छी नहीं होती. So it's okay.
नहीं वैसी बात नहीं है, but I think there are a lot of coincidences that I've always written about like on my feed, but I don't know how many people have actually attended, read it, or like as in what happened. But हाँ 2015 ISL फाइनल में आप मैं और शिखर थे जो फाइनल देखने गए थे गोवा. My first visit to Goa as well. And शिखर को मैं मिला था when like Delhi Dynamos was formed in Delhi, the first press conference that happened. That was the first time I met शिखर along with Priyansh. तो 2015 फाइनल में ऑब्वियसली शिखर और मेरे को एक्रेड नहीं मिला था बिकॉज वी डिडंट हैव द फाइनल्स के लिए एक्रेड. तो हम दोनों स्टैंड्स पे थे एंड आप मीडिया स्टैंड पे थे एंड आई सी मिस्टर लीलाधर सिंह ऑन द ग्राउंड.
Was my last match as a journalist, by the way. So ended on quite a high. Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah,
go ahead.
हाँ पर
Go
हाँ
ahead. Go
but
ahead. Go ahead.
nevertheless तो there was Mr. Leeladhar Singh and Rohan D'Souza on the ground like as you know क्योंकि वो final उस time पे third season था it was quite happening and Shikhar I remember Shikhar telling me कि भाई बनना है तो वो बंदा बनना है ग्राउंड में रहना है साला सब कुछ कंट्रोल करना है मैंने कहा हाँ यार मतलब चौड़ है अलग मतलब यही करना है and like
हाँ,
then both of us were just wondering if we can do that like you know be on the ground and watch it from the sidelines and like you know and control everything like we're the master of the show. uh,
हम्म,
Fortunately enough 2 years later 2017 ISL final I was that guy. बस मुझे
हम्म,
ये नहीं पता था कि ये इतनी जल्दी होगा सो इट वाज लाइक वेरी ओवरवेलमिंग क्योंकि उसके बाद का मैंने प्लान नहीं किया था कि यार इसके बाद मैं
हम्म,
क्या करूंगा because I plan so
हम्म,
those things happened and but उसके बाद
हम्म,
Shikhar and I ended up working for Delhi Dynamos which again was a
हम्म,
coincidence because as I said Shikhar and I met in a Delhi Dynamos press conference. So it was pretty
हम्म,
surreal. And my first ever ISL match was also a Delhi Dynamos match against FC Pune City. So it's pretty. I don't know how the cycle completes, but the coincidences have played a very big role in my life.
हम्म,
Experience wise, it's a very different experience. That one you work from a league perspective, you work with a big organization, you get to know a lot of things. You started working with
हम्म,
like, and then I was fortunate enough to start working with a tournament which was hosted by FIFA. Of course, I was
हम्म,
probably not as involved as some of the other guys in the team were, but at the same
हम्म,
time, you are in line with what's happening, right? So you know the processes. You get to know that this is how things are done. It's not a it's
हम्म,
it's it's a very organized setup. Similarly, from that FIFA tournament, you go and work with one of the biggest sports tournaments in the country, run by one of the most efficient organizations. No matter
हम्म,
what people say, there is a fixed way of doing things, and you eventually you learn a lot of things. And
हम्म,
then to go back to a club setup where you're working at the very grassroots, right? From
हम्म,
grassroots to probably working with a team to
हम्म,
working with players to slogging it out like as from day in like night out all throughout the season to see a team win lose. So it has
हम्म,
been a variety of experience for me, but again like as you know there is so much more to learn because every day there is something new happening. Every day you end up because our job is also pretty dynamic. Things change
हम्म,
drastically. You join new organization, so you obviously have your past experiences, but I think no one can at any given point of time say कि अब तो मैंने सब कुछ कर लिया, I can retire.
हम्म, हम्म,
I think you eventually you end up getting more and more like as in things to challenges and like as in how you approach it. That 2020 was a big challenge for like as in किसी ने सोचा भी नहीं था बायो बबल में tournament करना, but now people have
हम्म,
done that, right? So I
true.
think there will be new things coming up every year, every time, and so that's what the beauty of this industry is, and that's how we all love working in it.
कभी अमलान ऐसा लगा क्या कि मतलब पिच पे खड़े हैं या मतलब किसी से बात कर रहे हैं या इंडियन कैप्टन का इंटरव्यू करा रहा है, कभी ऐसा लगा कि आई हैव अराइव्ड, कि
या
जिंदगी बहुत
वो
बदल गई, कभी सोचा नहीं था, आई हैव अराइव्ड, ये ऐसा लगता है क्या कभी? बेझिझक बोल सकता है, ज्यादा लोग नहीं सुन रहे। हाँ, इट्स ओके।
हाँ मतलब ठीक है। आई हैव अराइव का सीन तो नहीं होगा मतलब ऑब्वियसली क्योंकि आप जितना आगे बढ़ते हो आपके सामने भी एक बेंचमार्क उतना ही बढ़ता जाता है ना मतलब यू एवरी टाइम यू वर्क इन अ टूर्नामेंट यू कम अक्रॉस पीपल हु हैव डन better things or probably bigger things, right? Like as in
हम्म,
मैं आज
हम्म,
लीलाधर सिंह से मिला, उसने ये किया, कल मैं चेतन कुलकर्णी से मिल रहा हूँ, कल किसी से मिल रहा हूँ, and everyone is doing something or the other, which is like as in so your aspiration and your like as in goal keep on increasing. And also
हम्म,
it's an industry where you have intense competition. It's not that like as in you cannot settle by saying कि I have arrived, कि आज मैं I have arrived बोल के मैंने काम ढीला कर दिया तो कल मेरी जगह लेने के लिए there are 100 people there, so you can I don't think so कि you I at least have been in that position कि जहाँ पे मैं बोल सकता हूँ कि I have arrived या वो कर लूँ. Obviously when I look back it's quite a distance like as in that I have covered. It's मतलब
हम्म,
it has not been an easy one मतलब from Subroto Cup जिसमें मतलब कोई जर्नलिस्ट नहीं होता था to actually being fortunate enough to actually see Asia's largest football tournament.
हम्म,
That I think that for me that's relatively काफी लोगों के काफी सारे और ज्यादा स्केल होंगे कि मैंने वर्ल्ड कप किया है वो किया है पर मेरे लिए मतलब इफ आई पुट इट रिलेटिवली I have also done things. I also know my limitations that I'm probably
हम्म,
not someone who knows everything about like as in like as in I'm not a Joy Bhattacharya जो randomly कोई trivia दे देगा आपको sports में, nor am I a Gaurav Kapoor who can speak very well, और nor am I an Amit
हम्म,
सिन्हा जो मतलब क्रिकेट का एक मतलब पूरा बुक लेके या फिर मित चौधरी जो एक क्रिकेट का मतलब पूरा विकिपीडिया लेके घूमता है. I know what my limitations are, but at the same time I
हम्म,
also know that what I can bring to the table and what I can do. So
हम्म,
keeping a balance of it, I think like as in I'm doing fairly well. let's see. But it's very difficult for me to say that I'm satisfied with what I'm doing right now, because there is this hunger
Hmm.
that probably I want to do a little bit more. Uh,
Hmm.
Maybe I'm prepared or not. It's for someone else to judge at this point of time. But I really want to do something more at this point.
काफी काफी औपचारिक जवाब के लिए बेहद शुक्रिया अमलान. Thank you. I because the show is about being a sports strategist, so I have to ask you this, and I really appreciate you sharing your journey into working in sports. But if you had to pick out, 5 events that you would want to see as a fan, five events that you would want to see, five sporting events, what would they be? That's for me to culminate the show. So this particular episode, but five events anywhere in the world. If you had the superpower to be there, what would they be? Five sporting events that you'd want to see in person, and they can
Wimbledon
be
for
they
sure.
can be generic. Yeah, okay, fair enough. Yeah, you got the
Like
message. Wimbledon.
Wimbledon for sure, and I would have loved to watch Roger Federer play in grass. I don't know if I would ever be able to do it. Will he be still playing? But
Hmm.
that's one sport I like, as in I really love, and
Okay,
I really want to see that. I've always wanted to see Michael Schumacher drive.
okay, that's not
Again,
gonna
I don't
happen,
know if
but
that's not going to happen.
that's
So
not gonna
again,
happen. Yeah, okay,
that's
but
something
fair enough. Yeah,
I,
yeah.
Lords has been one of those venues which I have always fantasized since my childhood, because as in of the balconies, of the culture, of the British culture that we have, how people poise sitting and watching a game of cricket. So any test match in Lords would be preferably in India or in England, or probably any Ashes match there would be something that I would love to be there. Olympics, I'm not really an Olympic fan, but बचपन में ना मम्मी के वजह से मैं ना काफी gymnastics देखता था, because it's one pretty
Okay,
girls,
okay,
two
fair enough.
how acrobatic they are. So given a chance, I would definitely be want to be in one of those gymnastic arenas and watch them live. कि क्या वो सच्ची में flip इतना अच्छे करता है, or is it that TV? Because realistically तो मैंने कभी देखा नहीं है.
Fair enough.
Uh, Last,
एक
definitely
और,
a World
हाँ,
Cup final. Definitely a World Cup final. Uh,
football World Cup final.
Football World Cup final. Matlab, since I'm
Fair
working
enough.
in this industry, so I had to put it for my last that, kuch bhi ho,
Hmm.
wherever it is, but one Football World Cup final, not working, not under any pressure ki journalist report file karna hai, purely sit in probably one of the best seats and just enjoy the game, feel the game, and that's it. That's something that I really want to do.
That's a very wide range, Amlan. Federer in Wimbledon, Schumacher racing, sitting in the taverns, wearing a MCC tie and watching a match at Lords. What else did you say? Watch the floor exercise routine in gymnastics at the Olympic Games and watch the FIFA World Cup final. That's an amazing list, Amlan. Thank you so much for sharing. And thank you so much for being on the show to begin with. Again, guys, Amlan's been phenomenal in what he has done academically and in the field of sports that he keeps doing. Follow Amlan's blog as well, because he would kill me if I don't mention that. We'll perhaps
No, no,
drop the
no.
link. We'll perhaps drop the link in the bio of this video. And yeah, see you soon. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Amlan, again.
Thank
And
you so much.
see
Thank you
you
for
all
having
very
me. Yeah.
soon.